The following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. What a panel we have up here to discuss really an important issue to our city, and to our state, and to our country, education. This reminds me, and I think our mayor, David Dinkins, and Howard will remember one of the great initiatives that Abney did was New York is a college town. Well, here it is right in front of you. These are some of the leaders of our great educational institutions, and we're happy to have you all here this morning to talk about innovation and economic growth. How do we attract talent as well as employees, and to maintain and expand our domestic and global competitiveness? Rachel is the managing director of 1776, a global incubator and seed fund company with a mission to be inclusive and to attract and retain businesses to New York City. Rachel's background is multifaceted with her work in the city and state as being the lead tech person working with the governor and the mayor. So without further ado, please, I think, give a round of applause to our panel. And I hand off the mic to Rachel. Thank you.
I'm very honored to be moderating a discussion that is so timely, so important, and so critical to New York City and New York State. So honored to be here. We have limited time and a fantastic group of individuals and leaders of our higher learning institutions here in New York City. So we're actually going to forego introduction, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to kick off with some timely news. So just yesterday, there was a large announcement from New York University, and since we are here at Abney, an organization focused on continuing to invest in the future of New York, this is a great sign and indicator and show of commitment to the future of innovation in New York City. So President Hamilton, everywhere we look, we see that our institutions of higher learning are growing and expanding, including a significant expansion across your Washington Square campus and facilities across the city. What is driving this investment? Can you talk a little bit about the most recent news and why? And since we are here in New York City at Abney, what is so special and unique to New York City in all of this?
Rachel, thank you, and let me begin by thanking Bill Rudin. All of you for being here. Bill is a wonderful member of NYU's Board of Trustees, and of course you'll all see and recognize that Rachel herself is an alumna of NYU, so we are connected very much throughout this room. I arrived at NYU a year ago from Oxford University, and one of the things that brought me here was the incredible dynamism, not only of NYU, but obviously of its city that hosts the university. And for me, this recent announcement that Rachel makes reference to is a very important signal. It's a further focus of NYU on two fundamental things. One is applied science and engineering and its connection to the creative arts. And the second is to Brooklyn. And so it will be a major investment in our facilities in Brooklyn. At the heart of those, many of you who know Brooklyn will remember the old MTA building, the Metropolitan Transport Authority building on J Street, 370J. It's a 500,000 square foot building. It was given to NYU as part of the Mayor Bloomberg Applied Science Initiative. And for us, it's now becoming our MTA building. But MTA for NYU stands for Media, Technology, and the Arts. It will be a place where we focus creative talents with technological prowess. We will bring faculty, we will bring researchers from the engineering school, the former Brooklyn Polytechnic, now the Tandon School of Engineering. We will bring them together with data scientists, with storytellers from the Tisch School of the Arts, and that will allow us to create in the MTA building a real hub, a real focal point for the generation of new ideas, and from that, of course, will come new startup companies, new discoveries that will benefit enormously not only Brooklyn, but also wider New York. And you ask me, Rachel, why New York? Why is this such a special environment? Of course, it's a spectacular environment for this. I think you see in the room today, the panelists with me, all of you, the partnership that is possible here, that has been possible over many decades and centuries, we see now never more important for the development of the city. As the economic drivers of New York City begin to change, as the importance of high-tech, of biotech, the arrival of Google and Facebook, as the Alexandria Center up on the East Side plays a key role in the creation of new technology around biotech, this city and its relationship to its great universities, most of which are represented here today, that will be a vital driving force for economic growth and prosperity. And for me, the opportunity, and for us at NYU, the opportunity in Brooklyn to see bringing, for example, let me give an example, the Center for Urban Science and Progress, CUSP, allows us to develop this incredibly important, exciting new field of urban informatics, understanding at a deep and a mathematical level the nature of urban life and the way in which people interact with their cities. This will be part of the investment in Brooklyn, and as I said, reinforced further by the opportunity at NYU to bring the wide range of activities from the arts to music to education to bear on this place of this what will become a very important economic engine.
Thank you. And of course, every one of the institutions represented up here is continually making very significant contributions to New York City, but that's a great resounding expression of why it is so important. Of course, we have Cornell Tech opening to its first students very soon, and sort of all of us together are playing into this ecosystem of innovators that span the city. So I think it's pretty clear. We know that the majority of new jobs are going to be driven by the innovation economy. The majority of new jobs are created by entrepreneurs. Most of them are using, just to sort of go back to our theme today, most of them are employing the applied sciences to create these new companies, to build these new businesses that are not only creating new companies, but completely disrupting the business models of our legacy industries across the city. So we know that it is important. And as collectively, institutions of higher learning think about how they're preparing the future workforce and think about how you can, for example, prepare a student for a job that doesn't exist yet. One of the things that we're that at 1776 and in the innovation economy we're thinking about a lot is how do you measure success in those areas? So in schools you have grades. What does that look like when you're measuring the ability of a school to prepare someone for the outside world, for the private sector? So President Bollinger, we know that there are no grades in business. How do you measure the outcomes of initiatives that are geared towards supporting education in the applied sciences and potentially careers in the innovation economy, careers of entrepreneurs and the creation of new businesses? And what's your thinking on those metrics?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm not quite sure that I can answer your question, but I'll try. Listening to Andy makes me incredibly enthusiastic for the city and enthusiastic for academic life in America and beyond. And the reason I say that is because when I started at Columbia in 2002, it was very clear to me, and clear to a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, Dan Doctoroff, John Sexton, others, that, and this group, by the way, very clear that New York City had to develop an attitude and the conditions for truly, truly great academic institutions in the city. So every single major city in America has 2 or 3 or 4 very significant academic institutions. Harvard is better for MIT, and MIT is better for Harvard. UCSF, Stanford, Berkeley, all of these institutions define a metropolitan space. You can't have as great a university, a single university, as you can if you have a collection, an ecology of academic institutions. And in order for those institutions to be there and to thrive, they have to grow. I mean, this was one of the things that was so tragic, I think, about New York City academic institutions, certainly true of Columbia. Because if you go back to the Jim controversy of Columbia in 1968, I won't describe that, many will know the controversy just by that reference. It really stopped Columbia from being able to expand during the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. And so the issue we had to undertake was how to actually create a new campus at Columbia and new facilities around the existing campuses. We are just now opening the first new campus at Columbia in over 100 years. We just had the opening in October. The Mind-Brain Behavior Institute, the Zuckerman Mind-Brain Behavior Institute, is indisputably the best place for neuroscience and work on the mind any place on the planet. There'll be 60 labs, the greatest scientists. It is interdisciplinary. It connects with everything else. It defines what it means to have a new campus, School of the Arts right next door, et cetera, et cetera. 18 acres, 8 million square feet, 50 years of building. So while NYU can expand, which is fantastic, so can Columbia, and so can Cornell, and so can City University. And this is really a vibrant, vibrant place now. I think the answer to the question, to my mind, starts with just pure academic excellence. I mean, it is just a fact of life that there are only so many truly smart, gifted, creative, academic type of people in the world. And the institutions that bring those together and create the conditions for discovery of new knowledge are going to be the places that end up having the greatest exciting businesses around them. Business people, people who are in startups, people who are in established businesses, want to be around the really creative people. They will come, and you can create the spaces for them. You can do sort of technical things, but the fact of the matter is, it is genius that is the draw. And we are now in the process of drawing brilliant people into New York City and retaining them. I mean, every one of us, I'm sure, at this table has example after example of just what I'm talking about. Yesterday, I met with 2 people. We are recruiting from Yale. Yale is deeply, deeply upset about losing these people. We are deeply, deeply happy about having them come. It just goes on and on like that. If the measurement of success is something that just grates on the academic mind, because it's very, very difficult to measure the success of great academic work. That said, there's something about the modern culture that wants to do what you were doing, and I think what everybody at this table is trying to help stimulate and support. And that is entrepreneurship, applied work, real projects, an effort to try to get their institution to engage with the world more than it may be inclined. And coming along with that is a sense of we'd like to know whether we're successful or not. But all of that is built atop, appropriately, this profound kind of organization of very, very brilliant people organized in a way that is utterly bizarre. No sane person would ever, starting from scratch, design a university in the way that we have universities. Invite brilliant young people to come in, give them a lifetime job, have no real supervision. I mean, that's overstated, but they pretty much are on their own, and yet they come to work every day. They brood over their work. They write their books. They're in the lab. They produce unbelievable things. It's a great success.
Wonderful. So, and I want to get back to some of the sort of the creative friction that can result from some of the competition you were mentioning. And it's that foundation of learning that's so critical, which I'll also touch on a little bit later on. But just continuing with this thread of the interaction between academia and the private sector and entrepreneurs, Dean Huttenlocher, we're talking about applied sciences. So how do you sort of bridge that gap between the theoretical and the practical? How do you, for example, ensure that what's being taught in the classroom is current and what is needed in the innovation economy? Does the private sector play a role? Should it or should it not?
Sure. So, I mean, at Cornell Tech, we have both the benefit and the challenge of building a new university campus, a new graduate school campus, completely from scratch. And so, in fact, as President Bollinger said, universities are somewhat Byzantine organizations in their structure that have evolved over many, many centuries in some universities, but certainly it's measured in centuries, not in months or years. And what we've been doing as we've been building Cornell Tech, as we've been building the Jacobs Institute, which is the partnership between Cornell and the Technion, is really questioning many of the fundamental aspects of how universities are designed and built. And I think that, and we don't claim that questioning is applicable in every aspect of every domain of academic inquiry. We're also a campus that's very focused on one thing. We're a graduate campus focused on the digital age, so digital high tech. But digital high tech maps in very strange ways onto conventional academia. So you first think of things like engineering and computer science, but the arts are there, as you were just talking about with your new investment in Brooklyn. The arts are there, law, business. And it's not that everybody in a business program or everybody in an art program or everyone in a law program is focused on digital technology, but increasingly as digital technology permeates everything we do, there are big aspects of those disciplines that are fundamentally about the digital age. So Cornell Tech and the Jacobs Institute are focused on that digital age and cutting across the traditional academic disciplinary structure. So that's a fairly bold experiment compared to the way academic institutions are currently structured. But it's one that's allowing us to attract a really outstanding set of faculty here to New York City. I think all of us are working, as several people have mentioned, to bring the very best and brightest here to New York. But there's a real distinction, I think, at least in my experience in academia. We're bringing faculty who combine the kind of academic depth that Columbia or Technion or Cornell or NYU or other institutions would be looking for. They combine that deep academic expertise with really active engagement outside of academia. And to me, the faculty and the students are the core of any institution, but the faculty are the attractors for the students. The students don't show up for each other. They may end up spending most of their time relatively unsupervised with each other, but they show up for the faculty. And so we've been attracting faculty who have been building startup companies, who've been working with the largest technology companies in the world, who have started social entrepreneurial ventures, who are working in K-12 education. So all of our faculty really are a little bit schizophrenic. They have their deep academic expertise, and they have their social and societal and business and economic side. And it's that integration of those two things that's really the core experiment at Cornell Tech and at Jacobs. It's the integration, it's bringing people there who want to be working in the real world and be working in the academic world. They want to be held to the highest standards of any academic institution in the world. It's not an applied school in the sense of not doing first-rate science. I couldn't agree more with President Bollinger that that's what you need in an academic institution. But they have this applied side, and they tie those two things together. And I think back to this question of measurement, if we're really going to do something different, as we're trying to do at Cornell Tech and at Jacobs, how do we measure it? While I agree that academics are more allergic to measurement than most, and look, we're all a little allergic to measurement, who really wants to be held up there unless you can fudge the numbers like some people we know. But one of the things we've been thinking about a lot is both the traditional academic measures, but how do we measure these new aspects of Cornell Tech? And some of that does have to do with startup companies produced and other things. But you need to be sure that you really have a sort of a broad bouquet of measures, that you're not focusing in narrowly on how many startups did we create or how many billionaires did we graduate from our campus. There has to be a set of measures that respect the nuance of what academia is about, and at least in our case, with the kind of campus that we're building, that allow us to measure how well we're doing at this mission of combining fundamental science aimed at the digital age with the societal impacts.
And I would just, thank you, and I would just open that up. I know every institution up here has incubators and accelerators that are supporting entrepreneurs in wonderful ways and doing incredible things. If anyone else would like to give examples of how your institution is engaging with the entrepreneur community, with the New York tech ecosystem, and sort of what that experience has been like, feel free to share an example. And if not, I can call out some individual folks. Okay.
Well, let me jump in, and certainly at NYU, you mentioned incubators. There are a number of incubators throughout the city, a number of them focused in Brooklyn very much now, being there not only for the early stage development of companies that come into New York City from other parts of the country, but also obviously being sites where ideas can be taken and turned into viable companies within a nurturing, supportive, and expert-rich environment. And it goes even further. A wonderful new development at the Tandon School of Engineering is the Bunker Labs, which is for veterans, and bringing veterans into the entrepreneurial process, giving them the kind of business education, business plan development skills they need, and then assisting them in those next stages of being a key part of a burgeoning company. And you see then not only the benefit to the city of the economic impact, but also the societal impact of bringing people who would not otherwise be involved in these kind of entrepreneurial activities.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one thing, you're doing incubators and accelerators in the commercial sector, and I think that one of the things that's really crucial as we look at doing these in academia is that we ask the question, what do we do best in the academic world and what's best done in the commercial world? And there clearly is a gap that we're all trying to close. We from the academic side, people like you on the commercial side. But it's not always obvious to me that universities should run out and be doing incubators and accelerators. We should be asking, what do we bring as academic institutions, just as the commercial sector asks. And it's really to close that gap from both sides that's crucial.
What are the best practices on both sides, and how can we work together? And on the thread of, for example, veterans founding companies, I think that's a great introduction of the theme that's more and more focused currently on inclusive entrepreneurship and inclusive innovation. It's something we're very focused on at at 1776. When I went out on a Twitter to ask for questions for this group, and the #1 request was, please, ask about how these institutions are supporting diversity in these sectors and making sure that everyone is engaged in the new innovation economy, prepared for it. So Chancellor Milliken, again, not just limited to ethnicity and gender, socioeconomic diversity, would love to hear about how CUNY is thinking about this and how it's supporting that inclusion and diversity.
Sure, thank you. And thanks to Bill Rudin and Abney for having us. This is, I think, a great opportunity. So I agree with everything said so far. We need new investment in facilities and faculty. We need to attract the brightest faculty and who are going to be magnets for economic growth. The thing I would say about CUNY, and Andy and I were talking briefly before the session about the difference in scale between the world's largest private university and CUNY. We have 270-some thousand degree-seeking students and about 250,000 adult and continuing education. And so for 170 years, the mission of CUNY has been to be the pathway to success, economic, social success. In fact, we've got an advertising campaign now based on Andy Grove's statement about how CUNY is the American dream machine, an immigrant who did a great job economically. When I was thinking about what I would say today about what CUNY brings to the table in New York, we have great faculty. We have tremendously talented students. We've produced the largest number of MacArthur geniuses of any public university in America other than Berkeley. So, I mean, CUNY has... If you want to look at, thank you. If you want to look at talent, we have it in abundance. But so what else do we bring that complements these world-class universities at the table? I realize that I owe a debt of gratitude to Raj Chetty and his research team from Stanford, and also to David Leonhardt and the articles that he's published in the last few days about the engines of economic and social mobility. Because this is where I would start. CUNY, and everybody here is doing great things, but I want to use this one quote from Leonhardt's article about the research that's been done about the mobility of Americans from the lowest socioeconomic strata to the highest. The new data shows, for example, that the City University of New York propelled 6 times as many low-income students into the middle class and beyond as all 8 Ivy League campuses, plus Duke, MIT, Stanford, and Chicago combined. So this is what happens when you bring a CUNY table at the front. Apologies, but... So this is something that CUNY can do that almost no place else can do, and it does it better than most. So what does this scale mean? I mean, yes, we're huge, and we're very diverse. 40% of our undergraduates were born in another country. 60% received Pell Grants. It is an incredibly diverse institution, and if you look at the subject today of applied science and technology, the scale, we have 44,000 STEM majors. But then you look at the diversity of institutions, half of those majors are community colleges. So we bring an entirely different mix to the table, from associate degrees to PhDs. If you look at, drill down a little further on the size and the diversity of CUNY. Of those 44,000 STEM students, 36% are women. Of the 5,500 engineering students at CUNY, 80% are minorities. Of the 1,000 plus computer science students at Queens College, I see my colleague at Queens College in the back, 85% are underrepresented minorities. So this continues to be the pathway for immigrants, for underrepresented populations, and for low-income students. In the applied sciences, in the tech sector, certainly, and the numbers are very impressive, but also overall. Another example of the scale, we've got over 100 programs in applied sciences and technology. In fact, yesterday I just approved 3 new ones, one at John Jay, one at City College, one at City Tech in applied science, which will come to our board on Monday. I couldn't be prouder about the work that CUNY is doing in partnership with Columbia, NYU, Cornell Tech. and in serving and continuing to serve the city of New York. Now, just one more word on the connecting with, because I know this is important to this panel on connecting with the private sector. So we have a new strategic plan that we're launching, and we're sort of doubling down on all the elements that matter for sending more students, for even having a better story from Leonhardt next year when they write about social and economic mobility, about getting students in, getting them through quickly, and then connecting them with jobs. And we've got some great programs focused, one with Cornell Technion, the Whitney program with women in technology and entrepreneurship, to try to address the incredibly low and embarrassing numbers of women in technology fields that has been declining in the last few years. And this is a partnership with Verizon and other leading employers and Cornell Tech to bring in women in high school, give them scholarships, give them internships, and give them jobs in the tech sector. And we hope to do that many, many times over to try to bridge this gap and to produce more talented students in the tech sector in New York.
Thank you so much. And Chancellor Milliken mentioned a number of programs in collaboration with everyone else here, but if any other panelist wants to speak to some of the diversity initiatives, this is clearly, you know, when I was with the governor's office and working for Mayor Bloomberg, really one of the top priorities in terms of diversity. If any other institutions want to talk about programs or sort of their philosophy on approaching this.
Thank you. Well, I'm the new kid on the block, but not really so. We are here. Israel has the third number of companies on NASDAQ. 75% of these companies were either founded or run by Technion graduates. So our presence in the city is well established. We are delighted to be here, and I feel honored to sit among such distinguished leaders of the higher education in New York. It is my personal conviction that universities should have three pillars: faculty and students, which is obvious, and a mission, a statement mission. And I truly believe, and I'm glad I'm speaking about you, after you, that one of the missions of a university is service. Service to its community, to its society, to the betterment of mankind. I don't know how many of you know, but in the Technion, 21% of our students are minorities, Arabs. Of these, 61% are women. 61% are Arab women studying science and engineering. This is, I think, a world record. I don't know of any university with any distribution of men, women, with more women in science and engineering. And we did it in a structured way because we believe that diversity is a key for academic excellence. So Israel, the nickname is Startup Nation. Sometimes it's very embarrassing. It means that we are in a kind of an eternal process of startup. The number of startup companies in Israel in absolute numbers is more than in many, many of the European countries, even though we are a small country. The Technion was the cradle of this ecosystem. And there are many, many components that were responsible for being in such a position. And I remember that when we got the letter from Mayor Bloomberg inviting us to participate in the competition, I assembled a group of deans, and I told them, as Dan just said, you have an opportunity to build something from scratch in a very unique way. You start looking at the industry and business of a city, and you build a university that will be tailor-made for this industry and this business. And this is how we started to think about what we can bring to New York. And I must say that so far, it is a success story. Jacobs and Cornell Tech has become an attractor for fantastic faculty members and absolutely great students. We also share our experience in providing education to K-12. In the Technion, we have a program, we call it the Pre-Academic Enhanced Education Program, in which every year we have between 500 and 700 kids who come for what we call a second chance. These are dropouts from high schools. These are minorities. These are the ultra-Orthodox. They spend between 6 months and 18 months and then compete without affirmative action on acceptance to the Technion, shoulder to shoulder with graduates of the best high schools. Success rate across the last 10 years is 65%. 65% of them make it to the Technion, suggesting that you can encourage curiosity-driven research, being an excellent research university, and at the same time serve society. We look at Jacobs and Cornell Tech as a sandbox experiment. What we can try to do here, the very conservative academic structure of both Cornell and the Technion won't allow us to implement. But if it is successful here, we will do it. So we are delighted to be here. We feel honored. We feel that this is one of the greatest experiments in academic education in modern times.
Wonderful. Thank you, President Levy. And I want to get back to how how universities themselves can think like startups as well in a moment. But first, President Bollinger, want to give you a chance to speak to the topic as well.
I wanted to say two things about Jim's comments. Number one, public universities educate the overwhelming majority of students in the United States. And public universities are the backbone of not only education, but of many values that have permeated the entire academic system. And one of those values that comes out of our great public university system is this sense of inclusion, opportunity from all sectors of the society. And what he said about what City University does is just fantastic. The answer to preserving this and enhancing it is really public support. It is the decline of public support for the public university system across the country that has led to raising of tuition and so on to keep these going. Ideas about free tuition and so on are really beside the point. It is, if we want a great university system, it has to be supportive of the public universities, and it has to come through significant public support. The second thing I want to say is that if you care, as everybody in this room does and everybody on this panel does, about racial and ethnic inclusion, then you and we have to pay extremely close attention to the appointments that are made to the Supreme Court over the next 4 years. Because we are at the moment only 2 votes away from overruling earlier decisions which have upheld the constitutionality of both public and, for complicated reasons, private universities to reach out to American society and to try to be more inclusive of African Americans, Latinos, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Those decisions coming out of Brown versus Board of Education are really the mechanism by which we have become, over the past 40, 50 years, much more diverse on our campuses. And it is and will be the Supreme Court of the United States in the next decade that will decide whether or not that can continue. We have, sadly, examples across the country where states have backed off of that through legislative referenda, through other means, state constitutional amendments, and the results have been tragic. Berkeley stands out as, I think, one of the prime examples there. So this issue is very much on the table over the next 4 years.
Thank you.
May I just add one thing, and I agree with everything that's been said in this question. I wanted just to add one element, though. I'm a new New Yorker. I arrived here just a relatively few months ago, and one of the things that brought me to this city and this state is the wonderful higher education system that it has here, the enviable three-legged stool, the CUNY system, the SUNY system, and the private system. And I agree wholeheartedly with everything Lee said about the importance of the publics. They are strong and critical in New York State. But it is also actually a fact that in New York State, a small majority of undergraduates, slightly more than 50% of our undergraduates in this state, are educated in the private system. And so my hope is that as new initiatives are brought forward at the state level, important new initiatives are brought forward at the state level, that thought continue to be given and care taken, that as those new initiatives strengthen access and the public system, they also strengthen the very important network of private colleges and universities that exist in this state.
Thank you. And,
Victor, can I
yes,
jump
go
in
ahead.
just very quickly? I want to say, first of all, I say thank you to Lee, from the leader of one of America's great private universities, who was formerly the leader of one of the greatest public universities in America, and personally led the fight for affirmative action at our institutions of higher education. And so when he talks about the foundation and protecting that, we owe him a debt of gratitude. And so I would say thank you. And the second thing that I would add to his list of things we need to be vigilant about is how our immigrants are treated. There are 6,000 to 7,000 undocumented immigrants at CUNY, and I must tell you, this is an issue of inclusiveness. It's also an issue of talent and economic competitiveness. I host an event every year with all of my valedictorians from across CUNY, and I can't tell you how many of those students were undocumented when they came to this country and achieved enormous things and are doing great things today. And we need to, as a country, to continue the success that people like Andrew Grove and others benefited from, keep welcoming talent, and New York should be the hub for that talent.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that resounding commitment to diversity, to inclusion, to the mission of higher education, and also I think it's a really important point that I'm very frequently talking with the tech ecosystem, and it's not just about being the right thing to do. It's better for the economy. It's better for the tech ecosystem. The more different perspectives we have, the more interesting problems and interesting solutions that will come to the table. And I also love the reference to Andy Grove, who of course is a hero to the tech world. So in the software industry and the tech industry, there's this expression, I'm not sure it will translate, because I'd love to direct this to President Levy, of you eat your own dog food, which means you're practicing what you preach. So if you're building software, you should sort of be using it yourself. And if we take this metaphor to the academic world, where some may say that for hundreds of years, perhaps thousands of years, the traditional format of the instructor with the students hasn't really changed or been innovated that much. It's surprising. So perhaps should it be? So how are specifically the Technion, but how are universities innovating in the way that they are teaching? How are they themselves acting perhaps like startups, iterating, experimenting, and what does that look like?
Thank you. This is an amazing question. We are now in a turning point, I believe, in the history of education in general. You have to think about a teacher standing in front of a class, 10 years old, and every kid in his pocket has a device that allows him to get every information he wants, anytime he wants, in a split of a second. How do you teach such a kid? How do you teach a student that go to the internet and have a discussion group that allow him to have all the information that he missed the last year? We are in a period that we must think over the way we educate our students. 2 years ago, everybody was thinking that the classroom is out. There are going to be the MOOCs, massive online open courses, and a star lecturer will provide education to millions around the world. By the way, interestingly, the first MOOC that we put on the internet was in Arabic, nanotechnology, attended via Coursera by 9,000 students from the Arab world, including from Syria. I never understood how they found the time. We have to think about education, what it means now to educate students in engineering and sciences. The teacher, as a conduit of information, probably have to change. We have to think what are the skills needed in 2025, 2050, what are the jobs that are going to be needed at that time, and I believe that many universities are far behind in thinking about these issues. We try to do it in a very hesitant and slow way. In the Technion, we started to use MOOCs for specific purposes. So teachers get the information, teachers provide information via the internet, and then we have the inverted class, which means that the teacher come, the students at home get the content, and there are discussion groups in order to allow them to solve problems and to get some skills in problem solving. So all of us have to start thinking what's going to happen in 25 years. I'll just give you one example. Autonomous cars. Let's think about autonomous trucks. In the US alone, there are close to 2 million truck drivers. Think about a day when the trucks will leave New York, go to Los Angeles without a driver. 2 million people will have to find a job. So we have to start thinking about this era now before it's too late.
In my view, universities are constantly innovating, constantly innovating. It's the very nature of what we do in our research, pushing back new frontiers. You always have to be at the cutting edge. And if I may just put a slightly different perspective on this question, I came to NYU from Oxford University. Oxford University was founded in the 11th century. It is 900 years old. Oxford University was already 300 years old when the previous information revolution occurred, and it was called the printing press. And if you were a scribe, if you handwrote books, it was very bad. You lost your job. But Oxford and Cambridge and Bologna and Paris, the great universities of the time, they absorbed the book, and they did actually rather well in using and exploiting the book in the way they taught and the way they carried out scholarship. And I see exactly the same thing happening with the digital revolution. Universities, it will change the way we work. It will help us do what we do and do it better. But please understand that it is very much affecting the way we teach today. Look at a university like NYU, and I look around the room and I can see there are some people in this room who will remember something called the Sunrise Semester courses. Who remembers the Sunrise Semester? This was 1957. CBS used to broadcast NYU courses on television. It was not digital, it was analog, but it was certainly a revolutionary new way of propagating education throughout the state, throughout the country. Of course, that now has morphed, it's transitioned into online learning, the incorporation of digital resources into the way that teachers teach. It's not only online delivery of education, it's also the way we can reconceive courses. Let me tell you of another NYU course that's going on right now. It's a course called When the City Meets the Sea. It's a course focused on coastal urban environments, fascinating area. It's taught simultaneously in New York, in Shanghai, in Abu Dhabi, in London, and in Sydney. NYU students located in each of those major global cities. And on the internet, they get together, they learn from each other, they are part of a wider global group of students studying a very important subject and connecting with each other over the internet. And so, you know, universities, all of the universities sitting at this table and beyond are constantly innovating, and that will continue.
So, I just feel incredibly young. 1754 was when Columbia was created. And I'd say a couple of things about what Andy has said. I mean, Rachel, what you put on the table, I think, is very powerful, very complicated question. How will the modern university change in light of the new technologies? And there is a view which I've wrestled with, everybody at this table has wrestled with, continue to wrestle with. And the question is, Oxford may be 900 years old and Columbia 260 or so years old. It doesn't mean automatically that they will continue forever. There may be a point at which there is no longer a need for any of the institutions up here. What we have seen with the press, which I've been deeply familiar and part of for all of my life, what we have seen with the press is that they did not see it coming. They did not see that advertising, which was the source of their income, would shift to a digital environment. And every single newspaper, major newspaper and network in this country is on the edge of financial viability. And many, of course, have closed and been changed and bought by very wealthy people who can afford this. But our entire media system, and therefore our public discussion, as we're talking about every day now, has been profoundly affected by the changes that you've identified. So the question I ask myself is, are our institutions the last ones in the United States to not see it coming, and we will actually be forced to disappear gradually or immediately? My answer is no, that will not happen to us, and each of us is making a bet on that by virtue of the very things we said at the beginning about the expansion. I mean, why would you invest billions of dollars in new campuses, new buildings, et cetera, if you didn't believe that what we provide and do will continue? I can say why. I mean, I think it's not complicated. I think you take a young person, 18, 20 years old, and you put them in the context of, again, brilliant people in an environment where knowledge and ideas are just regarded as sacred. And you give them experiences I believe they cannot get in any other form, and people will continue to sacrifice and pay for that. That remains to be seen. It's a question that's on the table every single day, every single year, but that's my position.
Are universities still relevant?
Yeah, I'm afraid we still are. So I actually, just specifically to the Peter Thiel quote for a moment, you know, there's a concept in statistics and in the sciences of survivorship bias, which really is the whole explanation for the Peter Thiel phenomenon. You know, there are the Mark Zuckerbergs and Bill Gateses of the world, but 99.999999999999999% of people who drop out of college fail. They don't become Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. Yeah. And Peter Thiel is frankly irresponsible because he understands survivorship bias. He's a very well-educated man. It's an irresponsible quote. You know, I think if I could just quickly, before I answer your question, I wanted to come back, just sitting between Andy and Peretz, on the teaching front for 1 second, which I think does fit more generally into this question about the relevance of academia going forward. I think that our challenge right now in academic institutions is that we're not changing fast enough. So I couldn't agree with you more that universities are, you know, have long been places of change. We've adapted to lots of new technologies, the book, television, the internet. But one of the hallmarks of the digital age is that the pace of change is accelerating rapidly. And universities, because they're very deliberative, consensus-oriented organizations, move slowly. And I think that is a big problem for us. I don't think it's going to kill us, but I think that, you know, to the degree to which we don't adapt quickly, that's going to become a big problem. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things about the Cornell Tech experiment, is that we're innovating in curriculum incredibly quickly, sometimes so quickly that, our master's students, wait, last year, I know students who were here, they were taught this, we're being taught that. We've built an entirely new master's curriculum that complements the depth of the individual disciplines with a cross-program studio curriculum where students actually build stuff. So, we have teams of students, engineers, computer scientists, MBAs, lawyers who build digital products. That kind of experimentation with radical change in curriculum, that doesn't replace the depth of the degree programs, but it complements it, is really crucial. Okay. I do think that in terms of how we're going to continue to provide value to society, if we don't innovate and change more rapidly, we will continue to be under threat from the rest of society because other things are changing more rapidly. And I think some of the loss of public support for universities recently is our fault. Some of it's societal, but some of it is us really understanding what the needs are and responding more quickly.
Can I have 30 seconds just to cap this up? Because I want to follow up just very briefly on that point, but also Lee's about funding. I think the difference today and how universities will continue to thrive and be relevant in the future is captured in part by this panel. It is a new level of collaboration and connectedness. My campus is connecting with these, doing new things. It's a connection with K-12 that in levels that we haven't seen before, and it's a connectivity with the business community, which is the coin of the realm now at research universities and large public and private institutions, is how do we connect in real time with our partners so that we're innovating at the same rate that they're innovating, and it is a symbiotic relationship that benefits everyone. That's how I think we're going to stay relevant.
It's a fantastic message. So I think we're just out of time. I just want to end on with a quick quote to counter that other existential threat from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, arguably one of the most successful incubators of all time on the
West
Cornellian coast. Okay, there you go. Had to get that in. He was asked this question recently when speaking to a group of college students. They said, is this relevant? Should I just drop out? And he said, absolutely not. At its best, starting a startup is an ulterior motive for satisfying curiosity, and the best thing you can do is be incredibly curious, intellectually curious about something, and then the startup is your means of answering that. So if I could distill down my advice, it would be 2 words: just learn. Please join me in thanking this fantastic panel for leading that.